Hello and welcome to the video about apply and configure baselines. Every agent monitoring a business transaction sends detailed performance and business data back to the controller, which, through machine learning, automatically creates a dynamic baseline for your core metrics. This helps you understand what normal performance looks like across your full-stack environment. The baselines appear in the following contexts in AppDynamics: flow map colorization, transaction score dashboards, metric graphs, and health rules. Performance expectations can differ between hours of the day, days of the week, or even months of the year. To account for this variation, you can use a rolling time period as the baseline context. A rolling time period establishes the baseline against data from the current hour taken at a daily, weekly, or monthly interval over the course of the time period. This visual helps to explain the periodic trends that are available for baselines. Monthly compares the day of the month to previous days of the month. For example, the 4th of the month to the previous 4th of the month. This is common for financial institutions that are reliant on monthly baselines. Weekly compares day of the week to previous days of the week. For example, Wednesday to the previous Wednesdays of the week. This is the most common baseline as it compares metrics to a specific day of the week. For most sites, the metrics are different depending on the day of the week. Daily compares each day to each previous day. This is more common for e-commerce websites where the traffic is fairly constant at a given time of day. AppDynamics calculates baselines by using the underlying hourly data. A baseline can be calculated for every metric. Baselines have two main variables. The time over which accumulated data should be considered in calculating the baseline or the seasonality of the baseline. The baselines can be used to identify trends, and you can check that the performance expectations can differ between hours of the day, days of the week, or even months of the year. For example, a retail application may experience heavier traffic on the weekend than the rest of the week. Or a payroll application may experience a higher load at the beginning and end of the month compared to the rest of the month. To account for this variation, you can use a rolling time period as the baseline context. A rolling time period establishes the baseline against data from the current hour taken at a daily, weekly, or monthly interval over the course of the time period. AppDynamics allows dynamic thresholds, which can be used when the metric value has a significant change in value to leverage the use of baseline standard deviations and percentages effectively. On the other hand, AppDynamics also has static conditions, which can be used with metric values which won't diverge much from average and for defining fixed minimum thresholds. In terms of best practices, you can use non-trending baseline as a dynamic lower limit, and you can combine dynamic and static conditions. In the metrics, you can check the number of standard deviation from the baseline. You can set health rule conditions based on baseline deviations. For example, you can configure a warning condition as 2 standard deviations from the baseline and a critical condition as 4 standard deviations from the baseline. This standard formula is shown in the slide where A equals sum of the data values, B equals sum of the squared data values, N equals number of data values. The standard deviation calculations differ based on the type of metric used. If the time rollup type, then we are talking about the sum or average. If the cluster rollup type, then it's the individual or collective. The cluster rollup type is applicable only at the tier or app level. Node level metrics will have the same calculations. To configure baselines, you start to navigate to Configuration and Baselines. Here you can see all the available baselines displayed in a list. The daily trend is the default baseline. This is the baseline used by health rules if another baseline is not specified during health rule creation. Click Set as default to choose another baseline in the baseline list as default. However, you can select any other trend type to use, and you can set the trend time period and the trend. The base time period is available in these 2 ranges. Fixed time range, from some specific date and time to a second specific date and time. For example, if you have a release cycle at a specific time, you might limit your data collection to that specific time. Or rolling time range, in which the most recent X number of days is used. This is the more common choice. Let's now move to a demo about the baseline configuration. In this demo about baselines, you should start to select one of the application available. On the top right, we can see the drop-down of the baseline, and we can select to not compare with any baseline. Or we can select Daily Trend. And, for example, in the bottom, we see the comparison between the real response time in this case and the average according to the baseline. You can also configure baselines. We have here some that were already configured, but you can create a new one. You select a name, you select a trend, daily, weekly, or monthly, and you select if it's dynamic or fixed. If it's dynamics, it will use a rolling time window, for instance, is the last month. Or you can select fixed, and you say a date that you want to use your baseline. After this, you just click on Create, and you'll see your baseline available here. The default baseline is the last 30 days, but you can select another as default by clicking just here where it says Set as Default.